For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Motsabi Hwayani. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Thank you, Professor, for your time.
Thank you.
NUMSA said that it will build United Front for Socialism that may lead to the formation of a workers' party. While there are other initiatives towards building unity, what is your reaction to these steps?
I think it's important to discuss the NUMSA initiative. On the same day as the Nkandla report came out, thousands of people in a number of parts of the country marched under the banner of NUMSA. And at one of the rallies, Ivan Jim, the General Secretary of NUMSA, said they are going to build a united front for socialism, and a united front that may lead to a workers' party. And we have heard that there are other initiatives. For example, this Awetu initiative is an initiative to bring together a number of organs of civil society, individuals with goodwill, NGOs and others. And Bobby Godsell and James Motlatsi have also spoken of a citizens' movement. I think what the NUMSA call raises is how broad is the unity that one seeks? Because the way NUMSA phrases its call for unity, on the one hand it says it will engage in wide consultations to build a united front similar to the United Democratic Front of the 1980s. But on the other hand, it narrows it down to those who believe in socialism and to the working class. Now that's very different from the UDF in the 1980s, because the UDF was a movement which included shopkeepers, professionals, students, people without homes, and a whole lot of other groups of people. And I think we have to ask ourselves at this moment in South Africa's history, how should one choose to unite? If one chooses to focus on the working class and socialism, immediately one is refusing to join hands with a number of other people who are unhappy with the current state of affairs in South Africa, unhappy with the violence, unhappy with the failure to meet people's basic needs as is required by the Constitution, unhappy with the diversion of public funds into private pockets, public funds that would have enabled some people to live in healthy conditions, to drink clean water, to go to decent schools and not fall through pit toilets and things like this. So what I am saying is, if the problem is broad, why narrow the response to only one section of the population who feel this problem? Why not have the working class, organized working class, join with other sectors? That doesn't mean that the working class will be weaker. It just means that the goals that they have, some of the goals are more likely to be realized, because you can't just walk over to socialism. You have to first deal with a range of conditions that affect the lives of workers. If you try to deal with these only with the working class, you're weaker than if you join with other people who are unhappy.
Now, if a united front includes organizations and people with disparate ideological approaches, must they sink their differences in order to build this unity?
It depends on the unifying program, the unifying vision that guides the creation of a united front. If you make the united front, as NUMSA seems to be suggesting, one that is based on revolutionary socialism and Marxism, obviously someone who is not a Marxist and who doesn't believe in socialism will have to bury whatever differences there are in the interests of unity behind that. But if you have a broad unity where you identify a number of democratic and social goals that are not as specific as socialism, not necessarily as specific as some environmental organizations may want, but broad enough to be compatible with people who believe in environmental goals, gender equality, and a number of these other things. And I think if you do that, no one has to sink their differences. But there's another way of people's interests not being realized, and that is not through saying that we believe in X and not Y, but by not mentioning some things like gender and sexuality. In a sense, the United Front of the NUMSA initiative is actually, its silences are actually a way of excluding people who feel the burden of certain injustices that are wreaked on them. And I think it's both what you say and what you don't say that determines how broad that unity will be. And in my view, it's very important to have the power of numbers, the power of a broad range of people who are unhappy with what is going on at the moment.
And finally, is it not simplest to build a united front with a single ideological approach?
I think that what I've said before answers that. I think that it may be that over time, the groups that come together into a unified front will develop cohesion, come to see very many things in the same way. In the United Democratic Front, when it was formed, they did not endorse the Freedom Charter because they hoped to draw in people from the Black Consciousness movement and from the unions, many of whom were antagonistic to the Freedom Charter. So they hoped to bring them in and over time build a common front without necessarily mentioning or requiring endorsement of the Freedom Charter. Unfortunately for the United Democratic Front, they didn't draw in these people, but over time, those who were in the front came to have a common vision which could be identified with the Freedom Charter. So there were some things that they did not all believe in the beginning, but they came through interaction with one another. Because one must recognize that within a unity, you have distinct identities. You have gender feminist movements, you may have movements for LGBTI people, sexuality movements, you have workers' movement, and they engage with one another. They advance their positions. And within such a front, people who believe in socialism would be free to advance socialism, so that in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, it may be that such a front would, with conviction, come to believe that the future is with socialism and come to accept that position. But it is undesirable, in my view, to start with an ideological position that only appeals to a few, because by definition, that means that those who back the front, the body of people behind it, will be limited.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that observation and analysis. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about politics and elections in South Africa.